Hello, this is Darksend, and welcome to the first of the Feral Druid video guides. In this video, I will cover the bear threat rotation. Like warriors, bears use rage as their resource. By speccing into natural perfection, you gain 3 rage every time you dodge an attack. By speccing into primal fury, you are refunded 5 rage anytime an ability crits. And finally, by speccing 11 points into the restoration tree, you can gain Omen of Clarity. Omen of Clarity gives you a chance on all of your white swings and mauls to enter a clear casting state, making your next ability cost no rage. You can further reduce the rage cost of certain abilities by speccing Ferocity and Shredding attacks. Shredding attacks is not a common talent in bear-only builds, however. There are 2 different rotations a bear might use. The first you use if you are not specced into Improved Mangle. This rotation is 4 globals long. This is because Fairy Fire and Mangle will both have a 6-second cooldown and will never overlap at any point. This is not true if you are specced into Improved Mangle. At certain times during your rotation, Mangle and Fairy Fire's cooldowns will both end at the exact same time. This is why you use the second rotation that is only 3 globals long if you do have that in your talent spec. Let's briefly go over the bear toolbox. If you don't have a paladin or a warrior for either Demo Shout or Vindication, keeping Demo Roar up at all times is your top priority no matter what. Demo Roar provides an attack power reduction to all targets around you. This can reduce incoming physical damage by as much as 20%. By speccing into Feral Aggression, you can increase the strength of Demo Roar by 40% with 5 talent points. Mangle is your primary attack. It is the 41-point talent in the Feral tree. It has a 6-second cooldown, but by placing 3 points in Improved Mangle, you can reduce that cooldown to 4.5 seconds. Fairy Fire Feral is a trained ability that does damage equal to 15% of your attack power. It also applies a 5-minute debuff to the target that reduces its armor by 5%. That duration is irrelevant, however. This is your second strongest attack behind Mangle, meaning you want to use it every 6 seconds, the duration of its cooldown. It has a static threat bonus equivalent to 700 white damage, as well as the threat done by the damage it does itself. It also costs 0 rage and can be used at range, making it an invaluable pulling tool. It also has a 1-second global instead of the normal 1.5, so if you notice that your rotations are half a second off, this is why. Lacerate is a bleed ability which you can stack up to 5 times. The initial application has a significant static threat bonus, but the bleed only does 1 threat for every 2 damage dealt. By speccing into Primal Gore, Lacerate can gain the ability to crit on every single tick. Swipe is a bear's AoE threat ability. It is also very good against single targets though. If Mangle and Fairy Fire are both on cooldown, and you already have a 5 stack of Lacerate on your target, Swipe is generally used to fill the gap. Speccing into Feral Instinct will increase Swipe's damage by 30%. It is not worth using on single targets unless you have 3 out of 3 of this talent. Its threat is equal to 1.5 the amount of damage it deals. Your final ability is the bear version of Heroic Strike, Maul. It is off global cooldown and thus used independently of all the abilities mentioned above. The main goal is as a threat dump, but against most raid bosses, you will always have it queued. By using Maul instead of a normal white swing, you gain threat equal to approximately 1100 white damage. Keep in mind, however, that it actually costs more than 10 rage, because every time you use it, you lose the rage generated from the white swing that is being lost. Now that all the fluff's out of the way, we can finally get into what you're actually supposed to do now. I'll talk about the Imp Mangle rotation first, as that's probably the more common of the 2 specs. As I said before, this is a 3 global rotation, meaning it will always be Mangle, 2, 3. 2 and 3 can either be a Demo Roar, Fairy Fire, Swipe, or Lacerate. This means that unless Demo Roar has fallen off, you will always use Mangle every time it comes up, and then use the following rules to decide which ability to use on steps 2 and 3. The first rule, if Demo Roar or equivalent is not active on the boss, you need to apply the debuff. The second rule is, if Demo Roar is on the boss and Fairy Fire is off cooldown, you'll use Fairy Fire. And then the third rule is, if Demo is up and Fairy Fire is on cooldown, you use Swipe. Of course, it wouldn't really be a list of rules if it didn't have a list of exceptions to go with it. Although in this case there's only one, and it only applies to the second and the third rules. Your first 3 rotations should always be Demo Roar, Mangle, Fairy Fire, Lacerate, Mangle, Lacerate, Lacerate, Mangle, Lacerate, Lacerate, Mangle, followed by a Berserk. Make sure to replace a Mangle with a Lacerate at some point during the Berserk to keep your 5-stack going. From that point on, anytime there's less than 3 seconds remaining on your 5-stack, using Lacerate to refresh that stack takes priority over Swipe and Fairy Fire. You'll notice the macro I added to the middle of my screen. This is to help simulate a 4 global rotation, even though I'm still spec'd into improved Mangle. It also ties into another point which I'll bring up in my conclusion. The 4 global rotation now becomes Mangle, Fairy Fire, 3-4. Except 3 and 4 can now only be Demo Roar, Swipe, or Lacerate, since Fairy Fire is now part of your normal rotation. Again, still Mangle and Fairy Fire every time they come up unless Demo Roar has fallen off. There are now also only 2 rules to determine what you use on steps 3 and 4. The first, if Demo Roar has fallen off, use Demo Roar. And the second, if Demo Roar is already up, Swipe. The exception in turn becomes, your first 2 rotations are now Mangle, Fairy Fire, Lacerate, Lacerate, Mangle, Lacerate, 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 Mangle, Berserk. Again, you must replace one Mangle with a Lacerate somewhere in there to maintain your 5-stack. After that, the duration remaining on your 5-stack, in order to determine if Lacerate will replace a Swipe, now depends on the step. Step 3 remains the same, less than 3 seconds. But step 4, anytime you have less than 5 seconds remaining at that point, Swipe becomes a Lacerate. I would like to conclude with a warning. There is a reason I did not respec before doing the second rotation set. And no, it wasn't gold. What happens sometimes is because of the offset of the 1 second global on Fairy Fire. People will think Mangle will not be up yet. If you have any kind of cooldown mod that does not show fractions of a second, Mangle will always have half a second remaining, and mods will show that as 1 second, and in turn gets interpreted as a full 1.5 seconds. This causes people to use an extra global instead of waiting that half second. In other words, Imp Mangle spec Druids use Mangle every 5th global, thus wasting those 3 talent points altogether, and people not spec'd into improved Mangle will use Mangle every 6th global, and thus wasting a lot of extra threat. There have been a few threads recently in the help forums about why is my threat low, other tanks are pulling off me when they're not supposed to, things like that. Should I gem hit or expertise? Part of the problem with threat is, in the people that have posted their rotations, they're right a lot of the time. So, one of 2 things can be happening. Either they're falling into the trap I just mentioned, or it's your weapon. A lot of people, even a lot of druids, don't realize between the ability to use polearms and the removal of feral attack power as a stat, just how much of an impact that has on druid tanking. The best way to improve your threat is to get a new weapon, hands down. I upgraded from Origin of Nightmares to the hard mode Yogg 25 polearm. I gained over 600 attack power. A few weeks later, I upgraded again to the 25-man hard mode Twin Valkyr staff. Between Origin of Nightmares and the Valkyr staff, that's 1200 attack power just by changing a weapon. There's no way to get 1200 attack power by upgrading gear. You can only do that through weapons. So if you're having threat problems, really go out there and start researching what weapons are upgraded, where they drop, and go out and try to get them. As for hit and expertise, we don't have tanking gear. We use rogue gear. Because of that, hit and expertise come a lot more naturally on our gear than it does for the other 3 plate-wearing tank classes. If you do need hit and expertise, don't gem for it. There's a lot of things you could do otherwise just to get it on your natural gear. For example, the Conquest Badge belt has both hit and expertise on it. Right now, on my character sheet, just looking at it, I have 40 expertise, that's including the 10 from talent, and 7.5% hit. That's not threat gear, that's gear I use, that's my normal progression gear, that's all gemmed for stam. you'll get expertise and hit naturally. You don't really need to go out of your way to get it.